My name is Clara Hensley. I'm 62 years old, and for most of my life, I've been the kind of woman who keeps her head down, counts her pennies, and saves every scrap of hope for the people she loves. I'm not rich. Never have been. 30. Years teaching third graders in a small Ohio town doesn't exactly fill your bank account with gold. But I managed to tuck away $18,000 over the years, a little nest egg I built by skipping vacations, sewing my own curtains, and eating more casseroles than I care to admit. To some, that money might seem like pocket change. To me, it was a lifeline, a dream I'd held on to through decades of chalk dust and early mornings. That money wasn't for me, though. At my age, what do I need? A new dress? A fancy car? No, I saved it for my family, for my daughter Lila, her husband Marcus, and my granddaughter Sophie. They're my whole world, even if that world has felt more like a distant star lately. Lila's 38 now, a marketing whiz in Boston, always too busy to call. Marcus, her husband, is 40, a salesman with a quick smile and quicker opinions. He's never shy about pointing out how behind the times I am. No smartphone, no social media, just a flip phone and a garden on my balcony. And then there's Sophie, my 9-year-old granddaughter with her gap-toothed grin and stories about school that light up my heart like nothing else can. But the truth is, I've always felt like I'm standing outside their lives, pressing my face against a window I can't open. Lila's calls are short, clipped, like she's checking me off a to-do list. Marcus laughs off my stories, says I'm stuck in the 80s. Every visit, I feel like I'm tiptoeing, trying not to take up too much space. It hurts, that kind, of quiet rejection, the kind that doesn't shout but just sits there, heavy in your chest. Still, I kept hoping. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could buy a few days of closeness with that $18,000. A family trip, 4 days at a seaside town in Maine, nothing extravagant, just a chance to make memories with Sophie, to feel like I belonged. So I planned it, all down to the last detail. I called Lila, my hands shaking as I dialed. She picked up, her voice distracted, like she was already halfway out the door. "Mom, what's up? I'm swamped," she said. I took a deep breath and told her about the trip, the money I'd saved, the little cottage by the ocean I'd found. There was a pause, and then Marcus's voice cut in on speakerphone, sharp and dismissive. "Clara, you don't need to spend your cash on us. We're fine. Keep it for yourself." My heart sank, cold and heavy, like a stone dropped into deep water. But I pressed on, my voice barely above a whisper. "Just 4 days, Lila. Sophie's got a school break, right? It'd be good for her, for all of us." Another pause. Then Lila sighed, annoyed. "Fine, Mom. I'll talk to Marcus, but don't make it a big deal, okay?" The line went dead, and I stood there, clutching my old flip phone, the dial tone, buzzing like it was laughing at me. I should have known then that hope can be a dangerous thing, but I didn't. I let myself believe that those 4 days could change everything. That was my first mistake. The second was thinking my family saw me as anything more than a burden. And the worst part? I didn't realize how wrong I was until I saw Lila's text to her friends, calling me a fussy old lady who ruins everything. That was the moment I knew I'd been fooling myself all along. I've always been the kind of person who finds joy in small things. A row of tomatoes ripening on my balcony, a handwritten thank you note from a former student, the smell of coffee brewing in my tiny kitchen. At 62, I've learned to make do with what I have, and what I have isn't much. My apartment in Ohio is modest, a 1-bedroom with creaky floors and a view of the neighbor's laundry line. But it's mine, and I've made it a home. I keep it spotless, the way I used to keep my 3rd-grade classroom with everything in its place. A quilt mother-made, a stack of old mystery novels, and a little clay pot where I grow basil. Teaching was my life for 30 years. And even now, retired, I still wake up at 6 a.m. as if there's a chalkboard waiting for me. Money was never something I had in abundance. My teacher's salary went to raising Lila, my only child, and keeping a roof over our heads after my husband passed when she was just 10. I stretched every dollar, learned to mend socks, and turned leftovers into meals that felt like love. Over the years, I scraped together $18,000, a sum that felt like a miracle to me. It came from saying no to new shoes, from driving the same rusty hatchback for 20 years, from skipping dinners out to put a few bucks in the bank. That money was my safety net, but more than that, it was my chance to do something big for my family. I didn't want it for myself. I wanted it for Lila, for Marcus, and most of all, for Sophie. Lila's 38 now, and she's built a life I could never have imagined for myself. She's a marketing manager in Boston, always rushing from one meeting to the next, her phone buzzing, with emails even when we're on a rare call. She's smart, driven, with a wardrobe full of sleek blazers and heels that click against the floor like they mean business. But somewhere along the way, she started pulling away from me. Our talks grew shorter, her visits rarer. When I'd call to ask about her day, she'd answer in fragments, like I was interrupting something more important. "Mom, I'm slammed. Can we talk later?" she'd say, and later never came. I'd tell myself she was just busy, that it wasn't personal, but it stung all the same. Marcus, her husband, is 40, a sales manager with a booming laugh and a knack for making you feel small without even trying. He's the kind of man who fills a room all charm and confidence, but he's never had much patience for me. The first time we met, he teased me about my flip phone, saying, "Clara, you're living in the Stone Age." I laughed it off, but the jabs kept coming. "You should get on Instagram, Clara. Nobody writes letters anymore." Or, "That dress looks like it's from a museum." His words were wrapped in a smile, but they cut deep, like paper slicing skin. I started to feel like a relic in his eyes, something outdated he had to tolerate for Lila's sake. And then there's Sophie, my granddaughter, 9 years old and full of light. She's the one who keeps me going, the one who runs to me with arms wide open, her ponytail bouncing as she tells me about her art projects or the frog she saw at school. Sophie doesn't care that I don't have a smartphone or that my clothes aren't new. She'll sit on my couch, eating the oatmeal cookies I bake, and ask me to read her a story. Those moments with her, they're like sunlight breaking through a cloudy day. But even Sophie can't bridge the gap between me and Lila. When I'm with them, I feel like I'm orbiting their world, close enough to see them but never close enough to belong. That's why I decided to plan the trip. I wanted 4 days with them, just the 4 of us, in a little seaside town in Maine. I'd found a cottage online, nothing fancy, with a porch overlooking the ocean and a kitchen where I could cook for Sophie. I pictured us walking on the beach, collecting shells, maybe even laughing together the way we used to when Lila was small. The $18,000 would cover it all. The cottage, the gas, a few meals out. It wasn't about the money. It was about the memories. I thought if I could give them this, they'd see me, really see me, not as some old-fashioned nuisance, but as someone who still had something to offer. I spent weeks planning, my heart fluttering, with a mix of nerves and hope. I called Lila one evening, sitting at my kitchen table with a notepad full of scribbled ideas. The phone rang twice before she picked up, her voice sharp with distraction. "Mom, what's up? I'm in the middle of something." I swallowed hard, my fingers tracing the edge of my coffee mug. "Lila, honey, I've been thinking. I've saved up some money and I'd love to take you all on a trip. Just 4 days, somewhere quiet by the sea. I found this cottage in Maine, and Sophie would love it. What do you think?" There was a long silence, the kind that makes your stomach twist. Then Marcus's voice came through, loud and skeptical, like he'd been listening the whole time. "Clara, You don't need to play travel agent. We've got our own plans. That money's better off in your savings. My throat tightened, and I felt a chill run through me, like someone had opened a window in winter. It's just 4 days, I said softly, almost pleading. Sophie's on spring break, right? It could be good for her, for us. Lila sighed, the sound heavy with impatience. Okay, Mom. I'll talk to Marcus. But keep it simple, all right? We don't have time for a whole production. The call ended and I sat there staring at the notepad, my neat handwriting blurring, as my eyes filled with tears. I should have heard the warning in their voices, the way they brushed me off like an afterthought, but I didn't. I let myself believe that this trip could be a turning point, that I could buy a piece of their time, their warmth, with the money I'd saved. I was wrong, of course. I didn't know it then, but I was about to walk into a storm that would tear away every illusion I had about my family. And it started with a single text message, one I was never meant to see, that cut deeper than any words Marcus had ever thrown at me. The morning of the trip, I woke up before the sun, my stomach fluttering like I was a kid on the first day of school. I'd spent the night before packing with care, folding my floral dress into a suitcase that hadn't been opened in years. It was my favorite, that dress, soft cotton with tiny roses, the one I'd worn to every school picnic and parent night. It wasn't new, but it was mine, and I thought it looked nice enough. I baked a batch of oatmeal cookies for Sophie, tucked them into a tin with a ribbon, and packed a bag of apples and granola bars just in case. I even slipped a small notebook into my purse, thinking I'd jot down little moments from the trip, Sophie's laugh, a sunset over the ocean. Silly, maybe, but I wanted to hold on to it all. When I pulled up to Lila's house in Boston, my old hatchback rattling like it might give up any second, their SUV was already in the driveway, sleek and polished. I stood there, clutching my suitcase, a nervous smile plastered on my face. The door opened and Lila stepped out, her eyes flicking over me from head to toe. Her brow furrowed just for a second, but I caught it. "Mom, that dress?" she said, her voice light but sharp, like a needle hidden in cotton. "It's a bit old-fashioned, don't you think? We're going to a nice place." My smile faltered. I smoothed the fabric over my hips, suddenly aware of every faded stitch. "It's comfortable," I mumbled, barely audible. "And it's warm enough for the coast." Marcus appeared behind her, grabbing my suitcase without a word. "Let's move, Clara. Traffic's gonna be a nightmare." Only Sophie came bounding out, her ponytail swinging as she threw her arms around my waist. "Grandma, you're coming, too? This is gonna be so fun." Her grin was like a burst of sunlight, and I knelt down, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I wouldn't miss it, sweetheart," I said, blinking fast to keep the tears at bay. For a moment, I thought maybe this trip could be what I'd dreamed of. But as we piled into the SUV, me in the back with Sophie and a pile of bags, Lila and Marcus up front, already lost in their phones, I felt that familiar ache, like I was a guest in my own family. The drive to Maine was long, the highway stretching out under a gray spring sky. I tried to make conversation, pointing out a lighthouse in the distance or asking Sophie about school, but Lila would cut in with a quick, "She's fine, Mom," or Marcus would change the subject to some work story I couldn't follow. My tin of cookies sat untouched in the bag at my feet, the ribbon still tied tight. When we stopped for gas, I offered to buy coffee, but Marcus waved me off. "We've got this, Clara. Just relax." His tone was polite, but it felt like a daughter being shut. By the time we reached the seaside town, the cottage I'd booked came into view, its shingles weathered by salt air, the porch just as I'd imagined. I felt a flicker of hope, picturing us eating breakfast together, maybe playing cards at night. But as we unloaded the car, Marcus pulled out his phone and started scrolling. "This place is cute, Clara, but it's a bit basic," he said, not looking up. There's a resort down the road with a spa and better Wi-Fi. Let's check it out. My stomach twisted. The cottage was already stretching my budget, but before I could say anything, Lila chimed in. Yeah, Mom, Sophie would love the pool there. You've got the money, right? Don't be so frugal. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. What could I say? They were already walking toward the SUV, assuming I'd follow. So I did. At the resort, the check-in desk was all glass and marble, the kind of place that made me feel out of place in my faded dress. Marcus booked a suite with a balcony, tapping away at his phone, while Lila pointed out amenities, hot tubs, a seafood restaurant, a gift shop. Not once did they ask what I thought. The total flashed on the screen, and my heart sank. It was nearly half my savings, gone in a single swipe of my card. I trailed behind them, watching the numbers stack up like bricks on my chest. Lunch was no different. We sat at a restaurant with a view of the ocean, the menu prices making my eyes widen. I was about to suggest something simple, a salad, maybe soup, when Lila grabbed the menu and started ordering for the table. Lobster rolls, crab cakes, a bottle of white wine. Mom, loosen up, she said, peeling a shrimp with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It's a vacation, enjoy it. Marcus nodded, already digging into his plate. Yeah, Clara, you don't get out much. Live a little. I forced a smile, but the food tasted like ash. Sophie reached for a cookie from my tin, but Lila pushed it away. She doesn't need sugar, Mom. We're trying to keep her healthy. I sat there, silent, watching them eat a meal I'd paid for, critique a place I'd never have chosen. This crab's overcooked, Marcus muttered, scrolling through his phone. Lila shrugged. It's fine, but nowhere near the place we went last summer. No one said thank you. No one asked if I was okay. I felt like a ghost at the table, invisible except for the card in my purse. The resort, the meal, the little extras they kept adding, it was all on me, like it was expected, like my savings were theirs to spend. The next day, we went for a walk along the beach. I'd hoped for a quiet moment with Sophie, maybe to show her how to skip stones, but Lila kept her close, snapping photos for her social media. Marcus lagged behind on a work call, his voice loud and impatient. I tried to keep up, my sandals sinking into the sand, but my knees ached from years of standing in classrooms. Clara, you're slowing us down, Marcus called out, not even turning around. If you can't hack it, just wait by the car. His words hit like a slap, sharp and public. I flinched, my cheeks burning, but I didn't argue. I just kept walking one step at a time, my dress clinging to my legs in the wind. That afternoon, Sophie wanted to visit a local market, a little place with stalls selling handmade jewelry and jams. I spotted a woven bracelet, simple but pretty, perfect for her. How much? I asked the vendor, my voice soft. Before he could answer, Lila cut in, loud enough for everyone to hear. Mom, why are you buying junk? That stuff just piles up. At home. $10 is still money, you know. She tugged Sophie toward a stall selling imported chocolates, dropping $50 without a second thought. My hand hovered over the bracelet, then fell. I walked away, the weight of her words settling into my bones. $10 for me was wasteful. Hundreds for them was nothing. That night I couldn't sleep. The resort room was too quiet, the hum of the air conditioner drowning out the ocean I'd hoped to hear. I got up to get a glass of water, my bare feet cold on the tile floor. I passed Lila's bag, her phone lit up with a notification, the screen bright in the dark. I didn't mean to look, but it was right there, a group chat with her friends, the words glaring like a neon sign. Stuck in Maine with my mom, it read. She's such a fussy old lady, always making everything a hassle. Can't wait to get home. A winking emoji followed, like it was a joke, like I was a joke. I stood there frozen, my hand trembling as I clutched the glass. My eyes burned, but I didn't cry, not yet. I backed away, step by step, until I was back in my bed, pulling the covers over my head. That text wasn't just words. It was a mirror, showing me exactly what I was to them. A burden, an inconvenience, someone to tolerate until they could leave me behind. I'd thought I was giving them a gift, a chance to be a family again, but all I'd done was hand them my savings and my heart, and they'd taken both without a second thought. The worst part wasn't even the text. It was what I started to notice after that. Marcus kept borrowing my phone during the trip, saying he needed to check directions or book a tour. He'd hold on to it a little too long, his fingers moving quickly over the screen. I didn't think much of it at the time, but a seed of doubt planted itself in my mind. Something wasn't right. I could feel it, like a storm gathering on the horizon. And when that storm finally broke, it would show me just how far they were willing to go to take everything I had. The trip ended like a book you close halfway through, knowing you'll never pick it up again. We drove back to Boston in near silence, Sophie asleep against my shoulder, Lila and Marcus glued to their phones. My savings were nearly gone, drained by the resort, the meals, the little extras they'd tacked on without a second thought. I felt hollow, like I'd poured everything I had into a bucket with a hole in the bottom. That text I'd seen on Lila's phone, fussy old lady always making everything a hassle, kept replaying in my mind, each word a splinter under my skin. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, a moment of frustration, but deep down I knew better. I'd been fooling myself thinking I could buy their love with a trip. All I'd done was make it easier for them to take what they wanted. Back in my apartment, the quiet was deafening. My balcony garden looked wilted, the tomatoes drooping like they'd given up too. I tried to shake it off, to tell myself I was overreacting, but something felt off, like a melody played just a note too sharp. A few days after the trip, I needed to pick up my blood pressure medication from the pharmacy, so I reached for my health insurance card. It wasn't in my wallet. I checked every pocket, every drawer, my purse, even the suitcase I'd taken to Maine. Nothing. My heart started to race, a cold prickle running down my spine. I remembered Marcus borrowing the card during the trip, saying he needed it to take Sophie to a clinic for a cough. "It's just easier with your card, Clara," he'd said, all casual. "I'll give it back." But he hadn't. I called him, my hands shaking as I dialed. "Marcus, hi," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Do you still have my insurance card? I can't find it anywhere." There was a pause, too long, before his voice came through, smooth and unbothered. "Oh, that? Yeah, I probably forgot to hand it back. Things have been hectic. I'll look for it and let you know." His tone was so light, like I'd asked about a lost sock instead of something tied to my health, my survival. "I need it soon," I pressed. "For the pharmacy." He laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "Clara, relax. I'll get to it. Talk later." The line went dead, and I stood there gripping the phone, a knot tightening in my chest. That laugh, it wasn't careless. It was calculated. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, so I drove to the bank the next morning. I asked to see my account statements, my fingers tapping nervously on the counter. The teller printed them out, and as I scanned the pages, my breath caught. There were transactions I didn't recognize. Hundreds of dollars here, 1,000 there, all through payment apps I'd never used. And then I saw it, an $8,000 transfer, straight from my savings to an account in Marcus's name. My knees buckled, and I gripped the counter to steady myself. I remembered the trip, Marcus borrowing my phone to pay for a tour, asking me to enter my bank password because his card wasn't working. I'd trusted him, handed over my phone without a second thought. Now I saw it for what it was, a betrayal, cold and deliberate. I went home, my mind spinning, but the storm wasn't over. 2 days later, a letter arrived from the property management company that handled my mother's old vacation cottage in Maine, the one I'd inherited when she passed. It was a small place, nothing fancy, but it was mine, a piece of her I'd held on to. I opened the letter, expecting a routine notice about taxes or maintenance. Instead, my heart stopped. The letter said the cottage was in the process of being transferred to Marcus's name, with a signature they claimed was mine. I stared at the paper, my hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped it. The signature looked like mine, but it wasn't. I'd never signed anything like that, never even discussed selling the cottage. My mind raced back to the trip, to Marcus's offhand questions about the cottage. You ever think about selling that place, Clara? Property's hot right now. I'd thought he was just making conversation, but now it clicked. He'd been planning this all along. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me, like I was falling and there was nothing to grab onto. But I couldn't just sit there. I needed answers. I called Eleanor, an old friend from my teaching days who now worked at a notary office in Maine. We hadn't spoken in years, but I trusted her. Eleanor, I said, my voice shaking. Something's wrong. I got this letter about my cottage and it says I signed it over. I didn't. Can you check? She called me back an hour later, her voice tight with worry. Clara, you need to come up here. Marcus filed paperwork to transfer the cottage. He included a document saying you're not mentally fit to manage your affairs. Something about age-related decline. There's even a medical report, signed by a doctor I've never heard of. It's fake, Clara. All of it. The transfer's on hold because they need your in-person signature. But he's been pushing hard, even hired a lawyer. I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred, tears burning my eyes. Not mentally fit? Me, the woman who'd balanced lesson plans and parent meetings for 30 years, who still did her own taxes and grew her own food. Marcus hadn't just taken my money. He'd tried to take my home, my dignity, my very sense of self. I sat at my kitchen table, the letter crumpled in my hand, and something inside me snapped, not with anger, but with clarity. This wasn't carelessness or greed. This was a plan, a calculated move to strip me of everything I had. And Leela, she'd known. She had to have known. All those times she'd brushed off my questions, defended Marcus, told me I was overreacting. They'd seen my trust, my love, and turned it into a weapon. I thought of Sophie, her bright eyes, her hug on the beach, and wondered how I'd let it come to this, how I'd let them make me feel so small. But I wasn't small. Not anymore. The next morning, I went back to the bank, my chin high, my voice steady. I need to report unauthorized transactions, I told the teller. Freeze my accounts, all of them, and disconnect any payment apps. I also want to file a fraud report. She nodded, her eyes kind but professional, and started the process. Then I called the insurance company to report my card as lost. I drove to the police station and filed a report about the fake signature, my hands steady as I handed over the letter. I even called a lawyer, a woman I'd found through Eleanor, who promised to look into the cottage transfer and the forged documents. That night I called Lila. I didn't expect her to answer, but she did, her voice wary. Mom, what's going on? I took a deep breath, my heart pounding but my resolve ironclad. Lila, I know about the money Marcus took, the $8,000, the credit card he opened in my name, and I know about the cottage, how he forged my signature, how he said I'm not fit to manage my own life. Did you know? There was a silence so heavy, it felt like it could crush me. Then she spoke, her voice defensive. sharp. "Mom, you're blowing this out of proportion. Marcus was just trying to help. You're not good with this stuff, you know that." "Help?" The word hit like a slap. "Help?" I said, my voice low, trembling with a rage I didn't know I had. "He stole from me, Leela. He tried to take my home, and you let him. I gave you everything, my time, my money, my heart, and this is what I get? I'm done being your bank." I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking but my mind clear. I wasn't just closing a call. I was closing a door, one I'd held open for too long. That night, I sat on my balcony, the air cool against my skin. My tomatoes were still there, small but stubborn, growing despite everything. I looked at them and felt something shift inside me, like a weight lifting, just a little. I'd thought love meant giving until you had nothing left, but I was wrong. Love doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. It means knowing when to walk away. And for the first time in years, I was ready to take my first steps. After I hung up on Lila, the silence in my apartment felt different. Not heavy, but clean, like the air after a storm. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for a call that wouldn't come, or hoping for a visit that would leave me emptier than before. I'd closed the door, and though it hurt, it also felt like freedom. I looked out at my balcony, where my tomato plants were starting to perk up again, their leaves green against the morning light. I realized I didn't have to keep giving pieces of myself away. At 62, I could finally start living for me. I made a decision that week. I packed up my apartment in Ohio, said goodbye to the creaky floors and the neighbor's laundry line, and moved to the cottage in Maine. It was small, with peeling paint and a porch that creaked under my steps, but it was mine. I spent my days fixing it up, planting a new garden with lavender and zucchini, hanging a quilt on the wall, setting out a table for my tea and mystery novels. The ocean was just a short walk away, and I'd sit on the beach some evenings, watching the waves roll in, feeling like I was stitching myself back together, one quiet moment at a time. I started saying yes to things I'd always put off. I joined a book club at the local library, where I met women my age who laughed loud and argued over plot twists like they were life or death. I signed up for a pottery class, my hands clumsy at first, but steadier with each bowl I shaped. I even started a small group for women over 60, a place to share stories about life, love, and the things we let hold us back. We called it Living True, and every Wednesday, we'd gather in a community center, sipping coffee and talking about what it meant to start over. I shared my story, haltingly at first, about the trip, the text, the betrayal. To my surprise, they nodded, their eyes soft with recognition. "That's my story too," one woman said, her voice thick. "I just didn't know how to say it." Back in Boston, Lila and Marcus's world unraveled faster than I'd expected. Marcus's sales job tanked when his company downsized, and the debts they'd racked up, some in my name, came crashing down. Lila left him, packing a suitcase and disappearing without a word, leaving Sophie behind. I got a call from a social worker one rainy afternoon, asking if I'd take Sophie in. I didn't hesitate. "She's my granddaughter," I said. "She belongs with me." Sophie arrived at the cottage with a backpack and eyes that looked too old for a 9-year-old. She was quiet at first, her laughter gone, but I didn't push. I gave her a room with a window facing the garden, a quilt like the one my mother made, and all the time she needed. We planted seeds together, her small hands patting the soil beside mine. I taught her how to knead dough for cookies, how to skip stones on the beach. Slowly, she started to talk again, about school, about the stray cats she wanted to adopt. One day she pulled out a sketchbook and showed me a drawing, a woman standing in a field of flowers, her hair blowing in the wind. Underneath, in her careful handwriting, she'd written, "For Grandma, who taught me how to smile again. I framed that drawing and hung it above my kitchen table. It wasn't just a picture. It was proof that love, real love, doesn't demand or take. It grows, quiet and steady, like the lavender in my garden. Sophie became my anchor, the one who reminded me why I'd fought so hard to take my life back. But Lila and Marcus, they didn't fade quietly. A month after Sophie moved in, Marcus showed up at the cottage, unannounced, his SUV parked crookedly on the gravel. He stood at the door, his usual swagger gone, his shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in it. "Clara," he said, his voice low, almost pleading. "Can we talk? I messed up. The job's gone. Lila's gone. Everything's gone. I need a place to stay. Not for long." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger where I'd once seen family. "You messed up?" I said, my voice calm but sharp. "You stole from me, Marcus. You tried to take my home, my dignity. You told the world I wasn't fit to live my own life. And now when you've lost everything, you think I'll open my door?" He flinched, his face reddening. "I was trying to help us, Clara. You don't get how hard it's been." I almost laughed, but it caught in my throat. "Help? You helped yourself to my savings, my trust. You don't get to call that family." I stepped back, my hand on the door. "There's a shelter in town, Marcus. They'll take you in. But this house? It's not yours anymore." I closed the door, my heart steady, and didn't look back as his car roared away. Lila called a few weeks later, her voice syrupy, sweet, like she was reading from a script. "Mom, I'm so sorry about everything. Marcus was out of line, but—" "We're family. Sophie misses you. Why don't you come visit?" I knew that tone. It wasn't remorse. It was a hook, baited with guilt. "Sophie's with me," I said flatly. "She's fine. If you want to see her, you know where we are. But don't call me for forgiveness you haven't earned." I hung up, and for the first time, I didn't feel the old pull to fix things, to smooth things over. I was done. Life in Maine bloomed in ways I never expected. My pottery class turned into a small business. I started selling mugs at the local market, each one stamped with a tiny flower. The women from Living True became my family, bringing casseroles and stories, filling the cottage with laughter. I began hosting workshops, free for anyone who wanted to join, where we'd talk about saying no, about finding joy after loss. People came, women with gray hair and young mothers too, all carrying their own hurts. "You gave me permission to start over," one woman told me, her eyes shining. I smiled, my heart full, because they'd done the same for me. As for Sophie, she thrived. She joined the school art club, her drawings brighter with each passing week. At night we'd sit on the porch sharing cookies and watching the stars. She didn't ask about Lila or Marcus anymore, and I didn't push. Healing, I learned, isn't about digging up the past. It's about planting something new. Looking back, I see now what I couldn't then. At 62, I thought my story was almost over, that all I had left was to give until there was nothing more to give. But I was wrong. Life doesn't stop when you're older, not if you're willing to fight for it. I learned that family isn't about who you sacrifice for. It's about who sees you, who stays when the giving stops. And if no one does, you become your own family. You water your own garden, paint your own walls, write your own ending. I don't know what became of Lila and Marcus. I don't need to. My days are full now, with Sophie's laughter, the smell of clay on my hands, the voices of women who've become my sisters. I'm not the fussy old lady they thought I was. I'm Clara, and for the first time, I'm living true, not for anyone else, but for me.